Hello K-Divas and welcome back to another tutorial. This is going to be a two-part project, and in this particular video I'm going to be showing how to make the sewing patterns for this jumpsuit that has a semi-fitted top, fitted waistband and a palazzo bottom. I'm going to show you how to take the measurements, make the patterns for the top, the patterns for the bottom, and then in the second video I'm actually going to show how to cut and stitch this piece together. So if you'd like to see how this was done, make sure to keep on watching. For a seamless viewing and watching process, I've broken this video into chapters, so please refer to them in the video description down below so you know what particular section you are at. We're going to kick off things with taking the measurements. My body has changed so much, so I have to measure myself all over again. I'm going to measure around my bust, my waist, around my belly, around my hip. I just had a baby, so my body is not the same, but I'm just thankful to see how well my body could carry a child, give birth, and I think I still look good. So there's going to be a list of all of the measurements I'm taking in the video description down below, because there are quite a few to create the top half, to create the trouser, as well as measuring around the belly area so I have a very nice fit that is flattering on the body. One very important measurement that I say you should not skip is deciding on how wide you want your waistband to be. I think that's what really makes a jumpsuit really attractive. Decide on that waistband width as well as the length of the trouser from the bottom of your waistband, and then measure around the thigh. I'm going for something that is a palazzo or really loose fit, so that around my thigh measurement is actually quite generous. The sleeve design is one that is joined to the body, so I'm just roughly measuring how long I want my sleeve to be. It is somewhat of a 3/4 sleeve, so it's not that long. I'm also going to measure around my bicep. I really want this jumpsuit to be very comfortable. The only fitted part of this jumpsuit for me will be the waist area. The top and the bottom will be loose. Also, don't forget to take your crouch depth measurement, which would ensure that the trouser fits really nicely around your body. I'm going to start off by drawing a long vertical line. This will become my center front line, and I'm starting with the front top pattern. Then I'm going to the top of that pattern and I'm drawing a horizontal line that cuts across like this. This would guide me to create the neckline. My neckline width from the center front line is 3 inches inwards, and then my neckline depth is 6 inches. It's a V neckline, so it kind of just goes down towards the bust, and I'm going to connect those points together so I have my neckline decided on the pattern. Once I'm done doing, I'm going to draw a slanted line from the neck point sideways. There is really no rule on how slanted it should be. I just guided myself like more or less like a 45 degrees off from the shoulder line, and then I'm marking my sleeve length of 13 inches. My sleeve hem width is about 7 inches that I'm marking across like so, and I'm going to draw in the hemline of my sleeve. The sleeve is really loose and comfy on the body, but if you want yours to be more snug, just mark the measurement that you're happy with. I'm going to draw a short line that goes across like this so it can help me connect it back to the body. I'm going to mark 15 inches below my shoulder point, and that is going to become the starting or the front edge of this top side, because the hemline kind of goes like high on the front and then down to the side. Now along that 15-inch mark, I am marking 1/4 of my waist measurement plus about 1/2 inch ease, so I have that dimension in place, and then I'm going to mark 2.5 inches below that. As I mentioned earlier on, the shape of that waist part is kind of like is high in the middle and then goes down to the side. So I'm just going in here to draw in the hemline of this top portion. This is going to be connected to the waistband, which will then be connected to the trouser. Now I'm just double checking that this region is wide enough to accommodate my bust. I really want it nice and loose, so whatever your bust measurement is, divide that by 4 and then add enough ease, and ensure that that side seam has enough room for it to sit well on your body. I'm just going in here to add my grain line so that guides me when it's time for me to cut this pattern piece onto fabric. But this design actually has a really nice pleats on the front, so we're going to be doing, you guessed right, my favorite thing to do, slash and spread. So I'm going to divide the front hem into 3, and I'm going to be drawing lines towards the shoulder line, and along these lines I'm going to be slashing the front pattern. I'm not going to be slashing it straight away because I need this pattern to guide me to create the waistband and the back pattern pieces, but I know I have these lines in place, so once I'm done using it as a guide, I can go in and slash along those blue lines that I just drew. After adding my seam allowance around the pattern, I know it's ready for me to create the waistband piece that sits on the front. And for this one, I'm just tracing off that center front line because this piece is going to be cut on a fold, and then I'm transferring the curved line of the hemline of this top piece. And then for the top edge, I'm going to divide my waist measurement by 4 and add ½ inch ease. The waistband itself is 6 inches tall on the center front edge, and it kind of tapers in towards the side. I'm just going to draw a line that goes horizontally from that 6-inch mark towards the side seam, so I have the bottom edge of the waistband. And along that bottom edge, I'm going to divide my around belly measurement, so around where my belly button is, which is slightly lower, divide that by 4 plus ½ inch ease, and then connect those 2 points together to have the side seam. I really ensured that the measurements I worked at my current body measurements, so this jumpsuit is a comfortable fit on my body. And I'm just going in to add seam allowance around my pattern except the center front edge because this particular piece is going to be cut on a fold. I'm just going in here to cut out the front waistband piece. The plan with this particular portion of the jumpsuit is to cut 2 pieces, maybe fuse it depending on the fabric I decide to work with, and then that would act sort of like a belt incorporated into this jumpsuit design. So I have the front waistband done. I know I can go ahead and focus on creating the back pieces. Because I've kept my front piece in place, I haven't slashed it yet, I'm going to actually trace off some lines from the front onto the back. So the shoulder is going to be the same, the sleeve hem is going to be the same, the side seam will be the same, but for the back there are 2 main differences. The first would be the hemline of the back piece. Rather than have it as this curved situation happening on the front, it's going to be a straight hemline that just goes from the side all the way to the center back edge. After drawing that in place, I'm also going to go to my center back and mark 5 inches above the waistline because the top back of this jumpsuit is actually completely open. I just decided to have it that way. You can have yours completely closed and just put a zip all the way to the top or buttons, whatever you like. And from that 5-inch point, I'm connecting it back to the shoulder point, so I have a very deep V on the back of my jumpsuit. I'm going to be fixing a zip that goes from this bottom edge of the top into the waistband and into the trouser. That is how I'm going to get in and out of the jumpsuit, and my plan is to add ribbons around the neckline so I can tie that up. The reason for this is it's going to allow me to easily undo this thing if I have to breastfeed my child in public without having to take off the entire jumpsuit. You get me? So now I'm done with the top half of the back. I'm actually going to go on to the back waistband. This one is really straight, really simple. The first thing I'm doing here is transferring the hemline just the same way, the same dimension on this top edge. And how I did for the front, I'm going to transfer the side seam. I'm just going to grab my tracing wheel because the thing with patterns is they're kind of like puzzles and they need to fit each other, else the seams won't really work. So I'm going to use my tracing wheel to just transfer the stitch line, which is this line that I'm tracing along, and then just mark the bottom edge. So once I connect the dots that I just made onto the paper and draw in the hemline, I know the front and the back waistband would join correctly along the side seam. Now the waistband width is essentially just the same on the side, and I kept it straight from the side all the way to the center back, so the back waistband is more of like a rectangular piece rather than the front that had the undulation happening on the center front edge. After adding all of my seam allowance, I'm going to go ahead and add a grain line so it tells me what direction I need to cut this pattern. I'm also going to add my annotations like I'm going to do for the front. I'm probably going to cut a pair for each side on the back then a pair for the front, so it's nice and stiff and reinforced on the body. I'm cutting off any excess paper that I don't need for this back waistband, and it's time for me to actually make the changes to my front pattern. So remember those blue lines I did earlier on? I'm going to be stashing from the bottom towards the top because the plan is to add the volume to the bottom portion of this front piece. So when this is pleated back into the waistband on the front, you get the really lovely pleats. You could also make yours gathers if you want, but I think the pleat makes for a smoother fit on the bodice. Now I'm going to tape down the front, the very center front edge, and I'm going to be spreading sideways, and I'm spreading the panels by 3 inches. So the distance between the first panel to the left and then the next panel is 3 inches. I'm going to tape it down, and the 3 inches is at the bottom. I'm going to repeat the same thing for the other panel to my right side, 3 inches at the bottom, and then tape it down. And by doing this, I've added extra volume into the bottom edge without changing the center front, the neckline, the shoulder, or the side seam. Because I've spread all of this, I need to connect them together, so I'm just using my pattern master to draw a new hemline that connects all 3 panels, and I'm maintaining that same curved feel that I had from the original pattern. I'm just going in here to cut off any excess paper that I don't need to complete my front top pattern. These are all of the pattern pieces I'm going to be using for the top half of this jumpsuit. The plan is to just use these patterns. I would not be lining the top half because I think I'm using Ankara to actually make the top, a plain fabric for the middle or the waistband, and then the same Ankara for the top I'll use on the bottom. I think I already have an idea of what fabric I would use, but the top will not be lined. Now moving on to the trouser, I'm starting from the front trouser pattern. I have a dedicated pattern tutorial for a basic trouser. If you want to check that out, I'm going to link it on the screen. But I'm going to start off by drawing a long vertical line, which is going to become my side seam. And along that vertical line, I'm going to mark the vertical distance from my waist to my hip. And once I have those points marked in place, mine is roughly 8 inches. The measurement you've taken on yourself, please make sure to use those measurements for your pattern, because then you have a really good fit for your body. I'm going to square across the hip line point, which essentially means drawing a horizontal line that goes through that point that I marked, and along that hip line I'm marking 1/4 of my hip measurement plus 1/2 inch ease. Now that I have this line marked in place, I'm going to go on to mark my crotch depth, which is distance from where I want the waist of my trouser to be to where my butt hits the seat, and mine is 10 inches. This I'm squaring across as well, and the dimension for my crotch line is my hip line plus 1/4 of that hip line. So the dimension that we marked for the hip line, you divide that by 4 and then add it to your hip line measurement. So ideally it should be a little bit longer or wider, so when they are connected back together they make the curved shape that typical pants, shorts they have. So before I go ahead to connect those points together, I am just drawing a vertical line that goes upwards towards the waist, and I am just drawing my waistline as a straight box at this point. This I would reshape later on, but first I'm connecting the hip to the crotch using the curved side of my pattern master, so we have a shape that looks like this. Now my waist measurement is written down, and once I compare it to this boxy shape that I've drawn here, I know how much I have to remove. So I'm going to be removing about 1 inch from the center front edge and the side edges, and then the remaining measurement I'm going to remove through a waist dart. Because I had exactly 3 inches excess to remove, I just distributed it 1 to the center front edge, 1 to the side seam, and then I have a waist dart that is 1 inch. Please work with your measurements so you have a very flattering fit on your body. On the center front edge, I'm going to be reshaping it by drawing a slanted line that goes from the 1 inch mark towards the hip, and then on the side seam I'm going to be drawing a curved line that goes from the waistline towards the hip, so it looks like this. For the dart itself, I'm going to be marking the middle point, and then I'm going to be drawing in the typical dart looking shape. My dart is 5 inches long, and I'm drawing in the middle of the dart point like so. Then I'm going to be connecting it to the sides of the dart along the waistline, so I have this marked, and when it's time for me to stitch, I now just need to transfer certain points for accurate translation. On the side seam of the waistline, I'm just raising it up by about half an inch or 1 centimeter, and this just allows for a more flattering fit around the waist of the trouser. My trouser length is 36 inches, and this I'm marking from the waistline towards the hem. I'm a petite lady, so I'm just going to draw in the hemline of my trouser so it goes as a straight line from the side seam towards the inseam. The next thing I'm doing here is marking the vertical distance from my knee to my hip, and that would guide me to draw in the inseam of my trouser. I'm going to draw a horizontal line that goes from the side seam towards the inner side of my trouser pattern. Now I'm going to go between the area between my crotch and my knee line and mark half of my around thigh measurement. If you want a more tailored fit, please mark that dimension around this point, because I essentially just want a fit that is straight from midway of my thigh to the knee to the hem. So it just goes from the crotch line a little bit inwards, and then the rest of this inner side of the leg is essentially a straight line. But if you want a more tailored fit, or if you want a different shape along the hem, this is the point where you make that change. But I love my palazzo fit because it's quite comfortable and it's really loose, and I've gone ahead to add grain line, annotations, and I'm also going to go in to add the seam allowance of 1 centimeter around my front trouser pattern. So this is ready for me to duplicate to create the back. I have this in place. I'm going to go ahead and actually cut it out and then make a second copy, because for the back trouser pattern, everything else is the same except the center back edge, as well as the shape around the top edge of the thigh. So I have my second copy in place. I'm going to set aside the first one I did and make some changes to create the back trouser pattern. On this copy that I made from the front, this is essentially just the same. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the portion between my waist and my crotch line. I'm going to find the middle point between my waistline and my crotch line, mark that with this blue pen. I'm going to draw a horizontal line that goes through that point, because I'm going to be slashing this and spreading it upwards along the center back. This is going to allow for a comfortable fit around your bum or around your backside. Then I'm going to be marking half an inch below the crotch line on this inseam edge, and then I'm going to be extending it outwards. I'm going to add some extra paper for that to actually happen and extend it by roughly 1 inch or 0.75. And because my trouser is already quite loose around the leg, I know this will still make for a comfortable fit. This I'm going to be connecting to the rest of the trouser pattern along the inseam area like so. So I'm going to cut off any excess paper I don't need on this particular edge, and then trim off the extra paper on this edge like so. But for that to happen, I'm just extending it outwards in such a way that it connects back to the edge of the original pattern. So once I have that drawn in place, I'm just trimming off the excess paper that I don't need along this edge and just toss that to the side. I'm going to go back to that line I drew earlier on with the blue pen, and I'm going to be slashing it outwards like this. Then I'm going to put some paper underneath so that allows me to spread things and retain shape at certain points. And I'm spreading my pattern upwards, so the bottom part stays straight, and then I'm spreading it upwards by 2 inches along that center back edge. And I'm going to add some tape to keep everything in place and then connect both panels together. I'm actually going to draw a slanted line that goes from the bottom panel to the waistline. So I'm trimming off some of the original pattern so I have a straight and seamless edge along the center back. Because we have done some spreading, I'm just evening out this side seam edge so we have a very clean and smooth pattern for the back. So that's essentially the back pattern, and that completes the final pattern we need for this project. In the next video, I'm actually going to be using these patterns to cut and stitch the jumpsuit. Because of how involved jumpsuits are, I split this project into 2 videos. So make sure to watch the second one if you want to see how to cut and stitch this piece together. If you have any questions, please leave them in the video comment section down below. I'm going to leave the measurements and any other useful information you might need in the comment section down below. And until my next one, have a good morning, afternoon, and evening wherever you are. Bye.